love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now waiting, better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything.
Hey everybody, this is Praxis. We've had a really warm spring here this year, and because of that I started planting things in my garden maybe a little bit earlier than I should have. And tonight we've got frost coming, so I had to prepare the garden for the oncoming frost. I wanted to share some of the techniques that I've been using to do that. If you're in a situation similar to mine where you put things outside and then suddenly it's going to be below freezing, it's good to try to protect the plants as best you can. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be 100% successful with all of them, but making some provision to try to protect them as best you can, you're going to decrease the losses that you get when the frost does come in. So let's take a look over here at what we have going on in our garden. You're going to see a lot of white stuff on the ground, and we're going to talk about that initially, but first I want to say where I got all this stuff from. We have been working with a sawmill recently. You can see some boards here that are just spread across the ground. One of the great things about working with a sawmill is you take stuff that is just dead trees you have kicking around, and you can turn them into beautiful lumber, and that's a really great asset. And this is one of the junkier planks from our clearing out the trees. The reason I say it's junky is because the ants, they've been doing some work on it. So you'll oftentimes take off a few layers of that before you get down to the good wood. And they were really great assets for, putting down walkways on the garden. So that's one asset you get. And another asset you get is a heck of a lot of sawdust. And that is what we're going to be using tonight to try to protect our plants as best that we can. In this bed here, we've got corn with a perimeter of pole beans growing up. And what I did is I just took the sawdust, because we had piles and piles of it, and I've overpiled a lot of the plants. This is a bean plant right here. You're gonna just get that stuff back up there, and that's kind of just like a little blanket for it. So that's one way that I was addressing trying to protect some of these plants. Another way, and this is a little bit more of a conventional way of protecting them, are all these containers here. Underneath each one of these containers was a plant that had already started popping up. So we've got them there, and I've got some dirt around the edges to try to keep them from blowing away. When we have larger plants, and some of them were larger, we have some sunflowers in here. We're using some tin cans. Just put that in right there. I think this one had peanut butter covered pretzels in there. You can see it's a little greenhouse right there with all the humidity kind of trapping on the outside surface there. We've got all sorts of other kind of recyclable containers, and we just had them because we didn't happen to have gotten rid of our recycling recently. Had a big bag of this stuff, and it's great to always have options like that to just have lots of different tools at your disposal. Here's a tin can right there on this one, and we've got a whole row for our tomato plants using these little yogurt containers. Last night it did get down to freezing. We had frost all over the lawn area, and I think it was probably a good idea that we winterized some of these plants that we have here. I think some of them probably would have been okay without the winterization because there wasn't a ton of frost, but some of the ones with the more tender leaves, in particular I'm thinking a bed of corn. We planted some corn in this bed over here. I think some of those more tender leaves probably would have bit it last night, so I'm glad that we did that. I've already removed all of the little pieces of recyclable containers and everything because I didn't want the sun hitting them and baking the plants at this point now that the sun's up. But I wanted to show you the process of removing the sawdust. Now I think if I had a leaf blower, that would be a pretty great way of removing the sawdust. I don't own a leaf blower, nor do I plan on ever. But I do have this really crappy bellows. It was advertised as having leather on it, but it's these little flexible areas are made of some kind of a leather-like looking plastic, which is fine as long as you don't plan on putting it near fire, because the plastic just heats up and melts. But it's completely inappropriate for its intended purpose. But I think it'll be kind of useful for this. So I'm going to set the camera up and we'll see me blowing some of this sawdust away. Underneath this pile right here are some corn plants. And the reason I don't want to just brush it away is that the leaves are really tender, and I think I could probably break and damage them. So I'm just going to use this to blow the sawdust away. This is working a lot better than it did this morning when it was kind of sticky. And I don't have to remove all of the sawdust. I just need to thin it out enough. Oh, there's some leaves right there. I just need to thin it out enough to make it so that the leaves can get some light through there. The benefit of the sawdust is it's going to benefit the garden afterwards, just more organic material. All right, I think that's probably enough. We've got one right here and a couple of them right there. I'm going to end up having to thin one of those out anyway because they're too close to each other. So, looks like they've survived totally fine. They don't look like they've been touched by frost in the least. So this worked pretty well. If we'd had a really, really hard long freeze, I don't know whether or not this would have been appropriate, but it certainly worked for last night. Hey YouTube preppers, it's great to garden outside, but sometimes it's even better to garden inside. If you'd like to see how we set up this greenhouse setup behind me, check out this video.